Hello, thanks for joining us, everyone. We're just going to give a few more moments before we get started to let everybody jump in. So I think we'll, in an effort to stay on schedule, we'll get started. I just want to say good afternoon and thank everybody for joining us. My name is Shannon Marshall from Convergence Networks, and I'm going to be facilitating the session today alongside our partners from Clio and my colleague Jen Grundy, also from Convergence Networks. So today, our conversation is about what it actually means to be AI ready in a law firm. So not just about tool adoption, but doing so in a way that genuinely improves operations and protects client data while strengthening outcome. So we're going to talk today about how AI is being used in firms, where the risks are emerging, and most importantly, what leadership can do to stay in control as AI adoption accelerates. So let's get started by framing how we think about AI in a legal context. And so one of the things we like to say is a helpful way to think about Gen AI is like a very eager junior associate. So Gen AI is fast and it's confident, and a lot of times it can be confidently wrong. So AI doesn't understand what matters most. It doesn't understand professional responsibility on its own, and it doesn't naturally recognize client confidentiality boundaries unless we explicitly set them. So Gen AI will use whatever data it can access without judgment, and it absolutely needs the supervision if the work is going to be defensible. So I think one of the main questions for leadership is this: would you let a first-year associate wander unsupervised into every file room in your firm? If not, then think of AI no differently. So the value is very real for the tool, but that value is best when it comes with supervision and controls. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We're going to do introductions now. So I will pass this over to one of our partners at Clio and let Joshua Lenon introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joshua Lenon. I'm the lawyer in residence at Clio. I'm a lawyer admitted into New York, but I'm joining from Vancouver, Canada today. It's a little bit cold and gray here, kind of that famous Pacific Northwest weather. I've been with Clio for over a decade now, researching the intersection of technology and the practice of law, and helping a technology company kind of understand the needs of the legal profession. On days like today, I get to do the opposite. I get to help the legal profession begin to understand technology. And part of what I'll be presenting today is our annual legal trends report and how it relates to artificial intelligence adoption by the legal industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Joshua. Jen, would you like to introduce yourself today?
Sure. Thanks, Shannon. My name is Jennifer Grundy. I'm a vCISO here at Convergence Networks. That stands for Virtual Chief Information Security Officer. I help clients across North America, actually, providing them strategic cybersecurity consultancy, helping them meet their governance, risk, and compliance goals that they have. In the last 5 years, I've worked with a number of legal firms on their IT strategy, helping them move their cybersecurity programs forward and discussing AI tools and technology. So it's my pleasure to be with the group here today. And Joshua just shared he's in Vancouver, so I'm here in Ottawa, Canada.
Thank you, Jen. I'm also located in Ottawa, Canada as well. So one of the reasons we're really excited today is because it brings 3 unique perspectives to the conversation, and we don't always get to sit at the same table, so to speak. So I'm actually a virtual chief information officer at Convergence Networks, where I assist firms, professional services, and help them line up their technology goals with their business strategy. So AI is definitely the dominating conversation that we have, and we've pulled this mix of people together intentionally because the one thing that we know for a fact about AI is the decisions that you make related to it are not just IT decisions. They're legal decisions, they're risk decisions, and they're business decisions. So what we found is firms that are getting this right are doing so by bringing all three of these perspectives together instead of operating them in silos. So with that in mind, let's quickly review the agenda for today. So we're going to really focus on 5 key areas. We're going to look at the current state of how AI is actually being used in firms today based on real data from the Clio Legal Trends Report. Then we'll talk about risks and controls, not just hypotheticals, but the real exposure that firms are seeing emerge. And from there, we'll shift into opportunity, and we'll discuss where AI is creating genuine advantage and how it's impacting both output and experience, and also how to measure that. Lastly, we'll close with a practical call to action. So we want you to be able to walk away from this discussion today with some real things you can do to help get AI ready. And one little housekeeping item that I do have to add is we'll save time for Q&A at the end, but please do drop questions and comments in the chat as we go through. So let's start with the data and what it tells us about where firms really sort of are today. So I'm going to pass this over again to Joshua to walk through some of the trends from the Clio Legal Trends Report.
Thank you very much. So first, I wanted to introduce the Clio Legal Trends Report. This is an annual report published by Clio, available for free at clio.com, and it is unique. And what makes it unique is all of Clio's offerings are cloud-based, which means that all of our hundreds of thousands of customers around the world are all using the same code base. And that means that we can, at an anonymized, aggregated level, analyze certain usage statistics. And I want to be very clear here. This is not confidential information or client data. We're looking at what settings are turned on, or are people accessing via the mobile phone, right? Very high level. But from hundreds of thousands of legal professionals, we can start to identify trends that are very important in how we practice law. And that high level anonymized analysis forms the basis of Clio's Legal Trends Report. It enables us to look at things like, what is the average hourly rate? It enables us to see what types of payment options drive revenue. And so I encourage you to take a look at the full report. We're going to be focusing on AI today. Big data like this always raises more questions than answers. And so we supplement the Legal Trends Report with a cohort analysis where we look at how law firms are performing over time, interviews and studies of legal professionals at a qualitative level, legal professionals in consumer surveys. We ask questions at a quantitative level. We had over 1,700 legal professionals, including 500 in Canada, and 1,000 legal consumers answer questions about some of the trends that we're seeing, the why behind the what. And then lastly, and I'm not going to cover this today, but we groundbreaking neurological study where we actually scanned the brains of legal professionals as they were using either traditional tools like pen, paper, Microsoft Word and Excel, or advanced tools like AI. And what we found in that was that using advanced tools actually decreases the mental strain of practicing law and enables lawyers to be both more productive, more accurate, and more capable of continuing in their day. They just avoided burnout. So you can access all of this at clio.com. But let's take a look at AI and what our latest report is telling us. Next slide, please. So AI adoption is on par or exceeds what we see in other professional industries. For the second year in a row, 79% of legal professionals surveyed tell us that they're using AI in their practice. In Canada, that number is even higher. It's 95% of professionals are telling us this. This rate exceeds what's being measured in other professions. McKinsey, the consulting company, taking a look at other professional types of roles, found that only 72 in 2024 and 78 of professionals in other industries were using AI. So legal is really leaning in to AI right now. And we're seeing this not just in the United States, but in Canada, where adoption rates are high. Of course, next slide. Adoption rates do vary based on firm size. And what we see is while adoption rates are high overall, they climb steadily depending upon the size of the law firm. So solos, 71% are telling us they're using AI in their practice. But when we jump up to larger firms, like say Bay Street firms in Toronto, 87% of those are telling us that they are using AI as the practice. And I think there are some different concerns as you go up in size here. And it definitely becomes much more of an IT management and a security and compliance concern the more employees you have using AI. And I know that Jen's going to be talking about this later. Next slide, please. We also know that the types of artificial intelligence tools that are being used do vary. Now, we asked about two specific types, what we call generic. These are your frontier models, your ChatGPTs, your Claude, your Gemini in Google Apps, and your Microsoft Copilot. Tools that are not really targeted towards a specific industry, but are instead this catch-all. And in 2024, what we found was legal professionals were more likely to report using legal-specific artificial intelligence tools. When we asked again in 2025, that had shifted. And what we see is that 46% of legal professionals are telling us they're using these generic ChatGPT, generative AI tools. Now, they're using them across a variety of different functions. A lot of this is marketing, website, correspondence, things where you might not need legal-specific training as a part of it. But we do think that you need to be mindful of the risk of what you're putting into these tools. And again, we're going to be talking about this as a governance issue. These tools are not fit for every purpose. What a legal-specific artificial intelligence tool can handle might not be something that can be done by a generic generative AI tool, and vice versa. So as you're building your technology stack, you need to be considering not just, is it AI, but what am I going to do with this artificial intelligence tool? And how will I make sure I don't go beyond the scope of what it's capable? Again, in Canada, we see the numbers are slightly different, with more lawyers in 2025 telling us they're using legal-specific AI than are reporting generic AI. And so it's interesting to see, once you cross the border into Canada, how things are slightly different. Next slide, please. The one thing that jumped out that I think is very appropriate to this presentation is that we asked legal professionals about, do you have AI policies? And this is becoming especially a concern as artificial intelligence just becomes embedded in every piece of software and technology that we have. 53%, so more than half of all the legal professionals that we surveyed, say their firm either has no AI policy or they're unaware of one, which is the same thing, to be perfectly honest, right? If you don't know what the policy is, how can you comply with it? This is problematic because, as we said, there are issues around data security, there are issues around confidentiality, there are issues around making sure you're getting competent technological service from the tool that you're using. And south of the border, we're starting to see more and more that lawyers are being encouraged or required, depending upon their client base, to have these types of AI policies. Just last month, New Jersey Supreme Court made it a recommendation that all firms have one, and they published a sample policy. The Virginia State Bar has also done the same. And I expect our regulators north of the border will be pushing similar types of organization principles into legal practitioners in Canada. So if you don't have an AI policy, you need to get one. And I think that leads us into our next section.
It does. Thank you, Joshua. So as AI expands exposure, new tools, new connections, and new attack surfaces, it definitely exposes blind spots and permissions, oversharing, and files you didn't know were accessible. So I'm going to ask Jen Grundy to walk us through some risk exposures and controls and pass it over to her.
Okay, thanks, Shannon. Happy to. So the thing is, at this particular stage, as Joshua mentioned, a lot of firms are using AI. However, they don't have a policy in place. And so what it's really important to understand is that AI expands exposure. And so as all these different tools are being used within the firm, the question is, whether those were vetted or sanctioned tools, for example. Did somebody review from a supply chain risk management standpoint? What are, for example, the values of that organization? What are the security policies of that organization? What are the security controls that they have in place? And the short answer today is no, that most organizations haven't done that. The other part of it is new connections. And so it's important to understand that those large language models, when paired with your actual data, provide the best results for your firm. And so what's happening is your employees may be making connections on the back end without you understanding that to your actual data within the organization. And do you have the appropriate controls in place and technical controls in place to actually prohibit that from occurring? So what that's creating ultimately is new attack surfaces that from a risk management standpoint, your firm may not have been acknowledging to date or just might not have been aware of. The next piece is that AI exposes blind spots. And so as organizations today, are reviewing what tools they might want to use, they might not be reviewing permissions. And so you might have set up these traditional file shares, or potentially in the last 5 or 10 years, you've used various document management systems or SharePoint, for example, as a repository. You likely haven't gone back when Bob and Jane had access to that. Maybe now Susie and Sammy got access to that. And does that make sense for your firm today? And so reviewing those permissions across your files, having good audit control, visibility is going to be an important part of this AI strategy. What happens also is that people might be querying the AI, and sometimes it could be nefarious or an insider threat, and ultimately other times it could just, be the fact that that particular prompt then shares information that it shouldn't have, and maybe you didn't have good handle on your HR file folder, for example, that you kept in your SharePoint file. And so as people are wondering about something at the firm, maybe your AI tool being extremely helpful. It's parsing all of that data and providing those responses, right? And so you might not have realized that blind spot existed, but now it's available to your team. And lastly, your AI is outpacing your controls. And so because AI, as Joshua just mentioned, has been kind of exploding in terms of utilization, a lot of organizations haven't really stepped back to make sure they have that generative AI policy in place from an administrative perspective, but also making sure that there's technical alignment so that there is good visibility on those kind of audit and control processes that I just mentioned. The other thing to note is that shadow AI is already here. So if Joshua was telling me that 80%, 99% of firms are using AI today and you didn't have a policy, I'm not sure what tools you are using today. And so whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot or Anthropic, what have you, your employees have started using those unapproved AI tools, and that's creating a lot of risk. So as I mentioned earlier, not having the opportunity to get ahead of it and actually vetting those tools, those supply chain management risks, where is that data going? Is it feeding the large language model? What controls does it have? As Joshua mentioned, is there particular use cases for particular tools? In the near term, you might have multiple tools for multiple use cases within your firm, and you need to make sure that you have good vendor risk management. A lot of the security incidents and breaches that we see in 25 and 26 are related to supply chain risk management issues. And so we want to make sure that there's due process for that. The other part of the concern is security control. So as your teams are using these various controls, I'm sure as the firms that are on this call today are confident they've got MFA in place, for example, as a baseline security requirement, but have you looked at the various security of these different platforms? And if your staff, for example, just went ahead and started using the tool, it didn't give you an opportunity, or frankly, they might have just agreed to the T's and C's that are within those products and their utilization, right, without and doing that on behalf of your firm. So making sure that you have an opportunity and getting ahead of those security controls is important. And lastly, there's no visibility for IT teams. And so as you have administrative and IT teams who need visibility to those different controls and making sure that that's within your risk tolerance and risk appetite as a firm, we want to make sure that those unapproved AI tools aren't used. So ultimately, this increases the attack surface. Those unverified tools also can introduce malware into your organization. And so as people are downloading maybe a tool that's ChatBPT that looks like ChatGPT and the logo is just slightly different, that could be introducing additional malware or other risks. And on the other flip side of that, do you have good detection tools, managed detection and response tools, SIM tools to be able to read telemetry from various things that are going on in your organization? And maybe from a detection and response standpoint, that your prepared to be able to address that today. And lastly, I think we've kind of chatted about this quite a lot, but making sure that your employees are not pasting information into public AI tools when that shouldn't be there, especially that confidential and restricted information types. Another part of the AI challenge, of course, is uncontrolled data. So, 20 years ago at firms, you might have had those bankers boxes on different floors. Maybe you're using a secure file storage, unit, for example, to put those into. The same thing has happened in the digital space in the last many years, right? So your data is in a lot of different places. It might be on your traditional file share. It might be in SharePoint. Maybe you're using a product like Clio, or you've got a document management system in place. And so the challenge with the different AI tools is, depending on the use case, your data might not be all in the same spot, right? And so it could be pulling redundant, outdated, or trivial data in terms of its responses. And so you want to make sure that your data is in order in terms of using these tools effectively. And in a lot of cases, AI is non-deterministic. And so if Joshua puts in something into the AI tool and then Shannon puts something else into the AI tool, right, it's going to produce a different response. And so, how can we streamline that a little bit better, making sure that that data has a good foundation in terms of those responses you're receiving? The other part of that is over permissioning that I mentioned before. So if I probably queried people on the call today, you're probably not checking permissions at all, I would imagine. You're certainly not doing that on a periodic or quarterly basis, and making sure that's part of your cybersecurity program, making sure that's part of good audit and control of your organization is imperative as we're looking at connecting these different AI tools and giving them access. So, you might have had particular what we call role-based access for Joshua and for Shannon, but now might have an agent or kind of a non-human identity that's being given access to things. And have you considered that as a firm and what access they might have? Lastly, there's ownership gaps. So as data is created, most data in the world, in fact, has been created in the last few years. And so who owns that data at the firm? Who is the data owner? Who is the custodian of that data? How do we apply the appropriate controls to that data? Have you had a conversation at the firm? Have you developed not only a generative AI policy, but a data classification and handling policy and data protection and standards policies to identify to your staff what data sets should be in what applications? If you're wondering about a high-risk use case and you're not sure what application to put it in, have you had an opportunity to have that discussion in terms of who should those categories of data be going to within the firm so that they can approve, for example, or deny what's about to occur there within the tool? What I want you to do from a solution perspective is take back control with understanding your data governance at your firm. So every file should have, a defined life cycle as data is created. So making sure that the data is in the right repository when it's created, making sure that you have, for example, what's called sensitivity labeling, making sure you have good data loss prevention strategies when the firm, making sure your staff are using that responsibly and productively. We want to make sure also when you're sharing data, as you're sharing that back and forth with clients, they might be providing data to you. Is that in a secure file transfer platform, for example? Is that being put into an AI tool for today? Is that being emailed back and forth if it's personally identifiable information or restricted information? Is that how the firm wants to handle that data? The next thing you want to worry about is retention. And so from a cybersecurity incident perspective, the more data that could be potentially breached in an incident increases risk and cost for your firm. And so in the event that you're breached and you held data for 20 years, for digital forensics to have to go through hundreds and thousands of files results in hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars of review on top of credit monitoring and all kinds of other things. And not only that, your brand reputation as well. So making sure you only retain data within the organization for so long as it needs to be, if that's financial and it needs to be 7 years, for example, or if the LSO or other associations require you to have particular requirements, how can you build that into your technology so that it's flagged, that this information, for example, has come up to its 7-year, and how do you make sure that that's deleted securely from your organization? So making sure you give some thought to kind of the full data lifecycle within your organization is going to create a better foundation for AI use, not just for today, but as technologies, change. There's a lot of conversation about quantum computing from a cybersecurity perspective. And so we want to make sure that you've got a good foundation for the technologies, not only today, but that are going to take you forward in 5 or 10 years from now. I talked a little bit about this a few moments ago, but what we want to make sure is that you're classifying your data. So both in an administrative policy, you want to have a data classification and handling policy for your organization. Here's just some examples. So you could be quantifying in a very simple way to get started, public data sets, things that are internal to the firm. So maybe that's policies, procedures, staff meeting notes, things that are required for legal operations. There could be confidential labeling that you're using, as well as restricted. And so you're going to encompass this all in your data classification and handling policy. But the next step is to actually apply those technical controls. So for example, there's probably a lot of firms on the call who are Microsoft 365 users. And so there is the ability to then actually classify these data sets either manually or automatically within the technologies that you have available to you. And then after that, we want to apply what are called data loss prevention strategies. And so in the event that somebody is looking to email out SIN numbers, for example, within the organization, maybe that flags, Joshua and lets them know, hey, Bob's trying to send some SIN numbers out. And then Joshua, has the opportunity to get the report on that and address or define whether that's appropriate for that use case or not. And, the biggest part of this conversation is visibility. How does your organization have visibility and providing guidance and policy to your staff so they know exactly, where those data repositories are and what is appropriate or not appropriate in terms of that data moving throughout the organization. In terms of use cases and getting started, coming from a cybersecurity background, what I want to talk about is risk, right? And so as your firms are getting started, if you're one of those firms who might be in that kind of unapproved shadow AI set and you're kind of looking to get some more governance around that, what you want to do is give your staff and teams some understanding of possible use cases. And so low risk use cases, of course, I think Joshua mentioned that at the top of the call, but it could be something like finding statutes or regulations, right? You're just doing queries back and forth. Maybe you're creating some outlines or first drafts. Maybe you've got an angry client, you're looking to respond in an appropriate and professional way. Those are some low risk use cases, brainstorming, things like that. So making sure your staff understand that's a low risk use case. A medium risk use case could be, flagging unusual clauses in a particular contract, highlighting missing terms, ensuring you're reviewing particular citations. That requires more oversight than the low risk use cases, but kind of still, feeling comfortable as a firm in terms of your risk appetite and tolerance. When we get into those high and prohibited, scenarios, those are frankly items which might affect legal rights, liabilities, regulated data, things that are going to affect brand reputation as a firm. We want to make sure that going back to that data classification and handling those, making sure we understand who those data owners are, going back to them and saying, hey, Joshua, can I go ahead and send this out, right? I understand in the policy set that this was, one of those areas that's high risk to the firm. I just want to run this use case by you. And then, he can decide, the risk appetite and the tolerance for the firm at that point. Certainly the prohibited category is very clear. And so making sure you outline that in your policy. So examples could be court submissions, regulatory filings, certainly uploading any privileged information into public tools should be certainly prohibited at this point. But these are just some examples you can kind of include in your policy to give people some guidelines that might not be sure what can or can't I do, right, when they get access to these tools. Next, I just want to talk about keeping the human in the loop. So from an IT perspective, we love our acronyms. So if you're kind of seeing this across, your learnings about AI, HITL is human in the loop. And so although AI can assist us in kind of, we'll call it drafting a first pass or a last pass review, summarizing meetings, documents, or matters, maybe organizing, and structuring data, right? Sometimes I'm kind of trying to think about how can I frame this information? So that's a good AI use case, or generating, frankly, starting points for research or analysis. We want to make sure that humans are a part of that process, especially in the legal industry. Your clients are paying your firm for your expertise and your experience. We want to make sure that you've got final legal judgment and the decision making through those processes. If it's client facing or communication and advice, you can certainly run that first pass with your AI tool, but you're going to want to vet the information that's in there before you actually send that out, and your name's at the bottom of that email. At times, various AI tools are questionable in terms of their accuracy or completeness and context, and depending, as I mentioned before, depending on how you put in that prompt and those questions initially, those responses can vary. And so we want to make sure that you're kept in the loop of that, and that's kind of built into your workflows and processes. I cannot stress enough, so to verify your citations and your sources. For example, within the Clio product, they do a really great job of kind of calling out where those citations are, as do products like Copilot as well. And so making sure that you don't kind of still take its word for it, you actually kind of go go back through that document, click on that citation that makes it readily available for you so you can actually read it yourself, hopefully cutting down some of that time. As Joshua mentioned earlier, whether it's the American Bar Association, the LSO, you have an ethical responsibility to maintain those professional standards. And so by ensuring that you kind of stay in the loop of those processes, you can maintain your defensibility through those processes while making sure that you kind of get the productivity and efficiency gains that we're talking about today. And now we want to move on to more exciting stuff. So kind of to round out the security conversation, if your organization today, I would surmise that it is based on Joshua's numbers. We have a number of kind of uncontrolled AI tools within the environment. Your employees are using those unapproved tools. Maybe there's inconsistent outputs. There's certainly, isn't any audit trail or defensibility. What I want you to make sure of when you go back today is making sure that you're starting to consider what are approved tools for different use cases. How do you start to get some governance around your data, making sure it's classified, building out those administrative and technical policies, making sure that your house is in order in terms of your data sets. What do you want these AI tools to query? How do we make sure that you've got high quality outputs, making sure you have auditability and traceability in those tools? What other DLP or other strategies can we put in place? You have full visibility. And ultimately, from a cybersecurity perspective, making sure those risks are managed and within your risk appetite and tolerance is going to set the foundation for success and making sure you're managing risk from a security perspective.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate all of that insight. So we know that AI is delivering lots of things, but I'd really like to share some numbers that Clio's collected. So we're going to pass this over to Joshua to talk about what AI is actually delivering today.
Thank you very much. And so I'd like to look at two areas of benefits that legal professionals are reporting from using AI. And the first of which is, what are they experiencing individually? And so we asked, if you're experiencing benefits from using AI in the practice of law, tell us which ones you are. 71% told us that they're motivated to keep up with technology now, which I found really interesting. Most lawyers find technology to be more of a hindrance than a benefit, right? And they're like, oh, what do I have to add now? But instead, we're seeing more and more legal professionals who are excited by what technology can do for them. 62% are telling us that they see an increased accuracy in their work. 58% said it reduces tedious work. They also feel conversely empowered to handle more complex tasks. So we're getting rid of the busy work and leaving you with billable work. But we're doing so in a way that nearly half of lawyers say that they have an improved work-life balance and a reduction in their stress, which leads to an improved job satisfaction. The last two, which I think are somewhat interesting, are we've seen an opportunity for career advancement now from having these tools available, right? You can now focus more on being a rainmaker because you're able to get your work done, or there's now different types of subjects that you can now offer through your law firm because you have the increased capacity to bring them on. And the bottom one, which is the smallest, but I still think one of the most important, is legal professionals are telling us, at least a third of them, that having AI in their firm makes them more likely to stay. And so if you're trying to build out your law firm and you're dealing with turnover or attrition of some of your best employees, having these tools available is actually a really big draw to keeping employees around. So there's an individual benefit that all of your employees in the law firm will see from having AI tools available. And these benefits, I think, are worth going through the steps that we saw before from Jen on just making sure we're organized and we've got a clear view of what's being done with these tools. But it's not just benefits to the employees that are emerging from AI. We can see the next slide, please. We're seeing firms report across the board that they're having benefits as well. So 65% are saying that they have improved work quality. 63% are telling us they have better client responsiveness. This is they're able to find information better. They're able to get answers quicker. They're able to get reminders from AI that's nudging them on task. And so this increased client responsiveness is also leading to improved client satisfaction and increased competitiveness within their spaces, all of which is leading towards increased profitability. Over a third of law firms are telling us that AI has increased their profitability. When we looked in Canada, it was actually 45% of law firms are telling us they see improved revenue because of adopting AI, and larger firms are telling us that 71% of them are reporting improved revenue. And part of that is probably coming from a reduction in operational cost. I have to spend less time on this busy work, and an increased work capacity. Since I'm able to get through things more efficiently, whether it's busy work or even billable work, I'm able to bring more work on. And if you remember, when we talked about the neurological scanning at the beginning of today's session, that does not mean that you're going to have just more work piled on you and more burnout. Instead, you're going to see your employees happier to take on more work because they feel like they're doing the important part of the work and having that tedious stuff drop behind. Next slide, please.
I think this is my turn now, Joshua.
Yeah.
Thank you for that information. So, I mean, you gave us some great statistics there, and now I want to talk about the wide range of actual use cases. Not because I think that firms should be doing all of these, but it helps to reframe how AI can create value in legal work. So I want to, instead of going through all of the items on this slide, I just want to sort of make three broad points. So what we're seeing is, first, AI is very good at surfacing signals. So it can help with patterns in court decisions, language trending in client emails, unusual clauses. This one keeps coming up in our talking points, in contracts. These things, sure, humans can definitely find them, but AI can find them faster, right? So again, it can free up a significant amount of time. Second thing is, AI can really help expand strategic thinking. I know Jen mentioned, you can almost like riff with AI sometimes and question it and use it to help you be developing your thoughts, your negotiation scenarios, or even maybe pressure testing assumptions. So it's not there to decide the outcomes, but it kind of widens the field of judgment, right? And third, it does help you prioritize what needs human attention. So in a document review or e-discovery, maybe a contract analysis, AI is not replacing lawyers, but it's helping you focus on what's most likely to matter. So when we look at all these different scenarios, it's important to sort of continue with that key takeaway that it's not about doing the same work faster. It's about shifting lawyer time toward the higher value judgment, the context, and the client interaction. And what I'm finding with a lot of the clients and firms that I work with, the biggest gains are the ones that are using these tools as a thinking partner and, not a shortcut, right? So I'm going to jump over here to how, if you were to implement AI, how do you actually measure success? How do you even get started? And I think we go back to a science project, right? You want to hypothesize. We want to sort of define, what do we want AI to improve at our firm? Do we want to improve speed, quality, client responsiveness, or capacity? And what I find in a lot of discussions is, if the first step is you have to articulate that in order to measure it, right? And then establishing a baseline. So before you introduce an AI tool, maybe capture how long it takes to draft certain types of communication, error rates, or how many times you have to revise something, if there's client feedback on particular workflows. Because without that, any improvement claims don't really have any defensibility to them. And then for the third step, we have to find some people within the firm that are willing to pilot, right? A small group with a narrow use case, so that they can learn safely and they can be champions within the firm. And then we have to measure it, right? We have to measure those baselines against outcomes. And at the end of that, adjust. So you're going to find you need to refine the way you prompt. There may be guardrails that we need to change or implement. As we mentioned earlier, these tools can surface things that we weren't aware of. And, you know, keeping in mind, the point here is it's not perfection right out of the gate. It's defining all of this for the future goals of rolling out multiple types of AI, because that's the direction that technology is taking us. And one of the things that we're finding right now with firms that adopt this effectively is, you know, clients are noticing the difference. Their clients are noticing that there's consistency. So clients are hearing the same tone, they're getting the same structure and the same level of clarity, regardless of who it is in the firm that they're interacting with. There's a really strong amount of continuity now. So clients don't have to repeat themselves nearly as often because context is being carried forward across matters, conversations, and touch points. And then the third thing that I find really interesting is that the lawyers are better prepared, right? So they have time for more quality. They're able to surface relevant information faster and identify patterns and precedents easier. So it's definitely giving more responsive. Sorry, Joshua, your chat just distracted me. But it makes you feel more informed and more able to be more responsive. So it's not just like about faster, you know, client service, it's about better client service. And that's the feedback that I'm getting across the board with a lot of the firms that I help. There's still a lot of questions on, you know, what is this actually going to do for our firm? How is there a way for us to measure ROI? So it's, you know, it does deliver value across multiple dimensions. And I think the leadership teams, they see these headlines, we'll say, but they don't have a way to like actively define it. So when you're talking about metrics, and there's a lot of information in the Clio report, we just didn't want to bombard you guys with too many graphs and bar charts. But what we have found here is, you know, we can assess how much time it takes to do a certain task, or how often we need to rework and revise, or how much we want to build and grow our pipeline. Those are performance-based things that are easy to measure. Things with client experience, so delivering better service, client satisfaction, employee experience, and adoption and behavior. Some of these things are easy. Some tools will come with a dashboard to see how many people are using an AI tool, what the adoption rate is on it. But it's more difficult to measure client experience. So one thing we look at is how quickly follow-ups are needed. Where are signals that there's no communication clarity? And are lawyers willingly using these tools, and do they feel confident with these tools? So the firms that are exploring AI, these are all the questions that we sort of ask and bring to the table and help you define some of this. So Joshua, I think you probably have more information that you can give on firms that are actually reporting the biggest gains in practice. So again, we're going to reference the legal trend report. But what I also want to kind of chat about is the evolution of AI and the tools that are being available to us. And I think we're seeing this now. Information we gave out 6 months ago is totally different than some information we're giving out today, right? The material that is put in the 2025 trends report is going to be very different than the 2026 trends report. So what's happening right now is most firms are in sort of early to mid stage. So you're using what's called conversational AI. So the chat bots, the generic tools like Joshua and Jen mentioned earlier, ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, some legal specific tools as well. But really, there's not a lot of people doing like individual productivity workflow integration to business transformation. That's the path that these tools are on. So each of these stages that we see here, they build on one another, right? So it builds on the last agent. So before anybody can get good at using orchestrated agents that work together behind the scenes, they need to know how to use conversational AI properly. And each of these stages still require governance, alignment, and structure. And while these tools are evolving rapidly, as we see, we want our firms that we know and work with to evolve deliberately. We don't want rushing to an end state. So I want everybody that's on the call today to think about AI adoption and the use of these tools as a maturity progression, not a list of things that you need to do right now. And when you're kind of trying to decide internally about how to start with different tools, the first one is chat, searching, drafting, these simple sort of tasks that allow you to get familiar with the tool. And then you can maybe eventually evolve into agents and tools that will help you move faster. But again, we want you to build on each level before you move forward to the next, right? And if you're at a mid stage, that's exactly where you should be. If you're just thinking about implementing security controls and governance to adopt stuff, that's also exactly where you should be. There's no race, okay? And then actually, that was perfect because we have this statement that I think it's from the Navy SEALs, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So in environments like legal practices, speed without alignment is risk, right? So we want these changes to be deliberate and smooth, and we want them to be able to compound faster over time because the house is in order, right? And I know one of the conversations I'm having repeatedly is there's this pressure to adopt AI tools. There's so many different specific softwares out there that specialize in different things, whether it's litigation, personal injury, all of these different types of very niche specific tools. And we can't say right now who's going to be the clear winner in this AI race, right? Earlier when we were prepping for this webinar, we talked about, years ago, there were tools like Ask Jeeves, and we'll talk about the days of, Mozilla Firefox and Internet Explorer. At the time, we didn't know who was going to win, but eventually Google became a verb, right? So that's probably going to be the case down the line with some of these AI technologies. However, we don't know who that's going to be right now. And there's so much pressure to move quickly with AI. But the risks are still being discovered and security models are constantly evolving. We discussed earlier on that regulatory expectations are still forming and the tools are constantly changing. So having clarity around your data, your acceptable use, the accountability, ownership, and your expected outcomes of how you want these tools to deliver is the best approach, right? It creates that stability and that control. You're not going to get exposed in any way from moving too slowly. And I think that that's really important. I'm not saying stand still. We do want you to move with intent, but without that sense of urgency. So there is a strategic posture that we recommend. All of us here have the luxury of working with multiple firms across North America. And we've kind of had the ability to learn and have conversations with the early adopters and those sort of bleeding edge firms. But we don't want people to copy them. We want to share the patterns and the standards and the proven outcomes with you and reduce that risk through clarity. So it's important that when you take this away, that you're deliberately tying AI initiatives to real business problems and not sort of curiosity projects. And that when you build these tools out, you are building them deliberately with the guardrails and ownership and measurement. So I think it's really important that we talk about the fact that you don't lose ground by waiting and planning your adoption in a controlled way. we have this framework where we say, you know, policy, data foundation, approved tools, training, measured scale. And that's the path to success, I believe. And I'm going to pass this over to Jen and let her kind of add her thoughts in there to get her perception on it, and we'll move to the next slide as well.
In terms of kind of, you're probably wondering, you know, when you leave the call today, kind of what are the things I should be doing, right? Or how do I take this back to the partnership group, you know, at your firm in terms of what are the appropriate approaches? And so, you know, frankly, whether from a cybersecurity perspective, whether we're chatting about AI adoption, you know, today, or frankly, best cybersecurity practice, the truth is that you have to, at a very basic understanding, understand how data flows through your organization, understand the types of data that you have, how do we classify those types of data so we can maintain, privacy, you know, for our clients, for our actual organizations, making sure that we're kind of doing this in an ethical and regulated way, making sure that we're having those good protections from a cybersecurity perspective is absolutely required during all these different changes that are coming with these technologies. So making sure you start to have some conversation, as Joshua mentioned, about your generative AI policy, data classification and handling policy, frankly, all policies that you have in the organization, even so basic as, you know, passwords. You know, what does that look like at your firm today? How do you kind of get your house in order? Making sure, as I mentioned, that you're protecting privileged and confidential information to the best of the ability of the firm. You know, due care and due diligence towards these processes. I want you to make sure you've got kind of clean and accurate and accessible data to make sure you've got the best outputs. If you're not kind of sure where to start, certainly, you know, myself or my colleagues here at Convergence Networks can help you kind of define those policies and guardrails, making sure you understand those acceptable and non-acceptable use cases that we talked about. You know, happy to help review with you for a better understanding, again, some of those, you know, associations or compliance requirements that you might have. Likely your firms are processing credit cards today. You know, are you in alignment with PCI, DSS? What are the risks with AI as those technologies are coming forward? So, you know, after that, once you've kind of got your house in order, we want to make sure that you're approving those tools in a controlled way. So as Shannon mentioned, you know, experimenting with different tools, you know, finding out what as Joshua mentioned, kind of in his reporting, you know, what are the best tools for different use cases at the firm? And there might not be today a clear, one size fits all for different use cases. Maybe you need something as a firm from a contract perspective versus something for kind of day-to-day document management. Maybe there's something different for M&A or litigation, right? And so have you kind of reviewed what those are? What are the appropriate use cases? Have you done good supply chain risk management? What are your policies on vendor risk management today? You know, are you sending out questionnaires to all the various SaaS tools that you have today, whether they're AI or not? You know, making sure you have some good governance surrounding that and that you're clear on the risk appetite and tolerance for your firm. More than anything, you know, I hope you understood through the conversation, we need to kind of train people and build confidence. As Joshua mentioned, you know, people want to stay at firms that are forward thinking. They want to grow in this profession. And so making sure, you know, if you're not sure as an SME today, and you might be on the call and you're kind of not sure where to get started, making sure you're finding the right subject matter experts to help guide you, provide education to your staff. Also, don't set it and forget it. 3 months, 6 months from now, these tools are changing. There's new capabilities, making sure that you kind of stay on top of it. I've used Copilot for the last few years. I gave the national webinar on it. I can tell you that Copilot is different today than 6 months ago or a year before that. And so make sure you kind of stay up to date. What are some tips and tricks, and have, you know, building a culture around both cybersecurity and also training on AI so people feel comfortable to have these discussions at the firm. And lastly, as Shannon mentioned, we want to make sure there's good ROI. There's a lot of tools out there today. And so if you're going to be dabbling in a few of them and you've got a lot of SaaS costs, $30 per user per month here, $50 per user per month there, you know, what is the return on investment? Making sure that you're kind of capturing that today and assessing that as time goes on. And as Joshua mentioned, as these tools are changing, you know, and firms are kind of seeing what works and what doesn't, making sure you're kind of right sizing those tools and making sure there's a good feedback loop is important.
Thanks, Jen. We appreciate that. So I know we went over a lot of information today, and we're just, I want to give us a few minutes to do some Q&A at the end here and review the chats. But I think the big takeaway with all of this information and a conversation I sort of have all the time is, you know, where do we start and how do we begin this journey? And so the AI readiness is about structure and intent. So if you're looking to help with policy and whatnot, you can definitely contact a Convergence. Joshua, you had shared the Learning Center from Clio previously as well. I'm wondering if maybe someone from the Clio side could throw that into the chat with the lot of information there as well. Some great material and guidance on how to get started with AI. I believe there's going to be, this has been recorded as well, so if you want to come back and visit this conversation, you can, but we're happy to continue the conversation at any time. So that pretty well wraps us. I don't know if Joshua, Jen, you have anything else you want to add? The AI Hub, thank you.
Yeah, I think our data is telling us that AI is already in these law firms. And so it's time now to really wrangle it into shape. And so that means taking a look at the tools that you already have. Are you using them to their maximum capacity? Are they integrated into the rest of your workflow, or are you just creating another data silo, right? And then lastly, making sure that you're using these tools in not just a beneficial method, but in a defensible method. And as Jim was talking about, right? Documenting your policies, but also your usage is going to be really key in both measuring the return on investment of these tools, getting the maximum benefit, and being able to justify the use of them to clients and regulators. So it's an exciting time. Things are moving swiftly, but I'm really excited to be a part of it. And I look forward to being part of many more conversations with you all.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure if either one of you, we have a few questions here in the chat.
Sure.
One of them would be about if a recording would be available so they can share portions with partners at their firms. And so, yes, that will be. We'll share this via email after the session. Another question that we have, and I think this is a great one, is what common mistakes are firms making with AI that they don't even realize at this time?
Josh, do you want to take it? No, I can talk from a security perspective after.
Yeah, I think just from a rollout, not enough time is spent on training, to be perfectly honest, right? These tools are very much a blank slate with tons of capability. And so unless you are specifically talking about what we expect the tool to do and here's how you use it, you're going to find a lot of employees are going to be wandering instead of being able to dive in and be productive right away. Now, the wandering is good because these capabilities are increasing and they're going to come up with use cases that you hadn't considered, right? And because you're providing the tools, that's okay. But if you don't roll these tools out with training, either from the tech vendors themselves or internally, you're going to basically have an anchor tied around yourself in maximizing the use of these tools at first. So definitely take the time to train as a part of adoption. And I'm sorry, Jen, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, that's okay, Josh. I was going to kind of take it from our, a security perspective. I think the mistake probably, as Joshua mentioned, is that people just don't know how widespread the usage is today. And so chatting about those shadow AI tools, probably people just aren't talking about it because they're not sure if it's approved or not. And it's, it's gaining kind of efficiencies and productivity in various areas of their work. And they're just not sure, maybe they've heard rumblings that the firm hasn't, defined their AI strategy. They're not sure where it's at. And so, unfortunately today, with the utilization of, frankly, web-based applications, it's fairly easy to set up a Chat GPT or Claude account, fairly readily. And if you don't have the data loss prevention strategies and tools in place, it's quite easy to start to kind of take some of your internal corporate data that frankly, from a cybersecurity perspective or vCIO perspective, we spent a lot of years building, right, a kind of a moat and a defense in depth approach to that. But all it takes is for your staff today, without the right tools in place, to then simply upload them into these tools, or frankly, download tools that aren't approved that could have a lot of security risks or malware and things like that. And so the big piece there is probably just visibility. You just simply don't have visibility today to what's happening in the organization, and how do you put the right tools in place so that you can have visibility and good context to be able to make the right decisions moving forward.
Yeah, and anecdotally, what I've discovered from just talking with other lawyers and law firms is one of the best ways to prevent this shadow IT risk is to have a method of getting tools recommended, right?
Mm-hmm. An AI committee.
Yeah, or an AI committee or a suggestion box, right? Listen to your employees when they say they need these things. It doesn't mean you have to give it to them, but it does mean that you know what they're looking for. You can provide tools that are comparable, right? Maybe it's just turning on a feature within tools you already have. And that gives you both visibility and control beyond just doing nothing. And as we saw in our data, right, this is actually very exciting to employees that they want to keep up with this technology. So you might as well lean into it and do so in a way that is the benefit of your firm, your clients, and your employees.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're at time right now, but Joshua, there was another question here that's specifically wanted to chat about AI tools that are being integrated into Clio. And so I don't know if you want to stick around and answer that, or if you'd like to follow up later. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you mind? I don't see the Q&A. It's not showing up on my end. Do you mind reading it? Or is it something?
Happy to. So it says, and this is from Jonathan Lynch, can you talk about the new AI tools that will be integrated into Clio?
Absolutely. So we're integrating AI into a variety of different spots within Clio. Within Canada, if John's in Canada, right now we have Manage AI and Draft AI, where we are building in artificial intelligence as a means of helping you keep on top of your practice and helping you draft in the best way possible. And the word that kind of governs how we think these tools will help is context. These tools help provide context such that you can get up to speed quickly on what's going on with your clients and your cases. It can gather and recommend actions that it thinks should be taken moving forward, like, hey, this document has a scheduled date on it. Do you want me to add that to your calendar? And they also make sure that you're just not missing anything. So when you're looking at Manage and Draft AI, the idea here is just to have almost an assistant who is helping manage things for you and making sure nothing gets dropped. So that's a great way to do it. But it also maintains that human in the loop interaction that we think is both very important in best practices for AI use, but also in supporting the professional independent judgment of legal professionals, something that we know is an ethical duty in this industry. So we don't get in between you and acting, but we do provide you all the context that you need to make a decision and then make it easier to act upon that decision. And there's a new product that we're launching called Clio Work, which is honestly a place where this context now becomes even more supercharged. It helps you with research. It helps you with brainstorming. It can do redaction of documents. It can review, honestly, thousands of pages of documents to help you get tabular review. And so it's great for both transaction and litigation practices. And the idea here is to take that kind of investigating brainstorming that is such a part of the legal practice and give you artificial intelligence powered tools to make that very easy without leaving your legal software environment. So it helps with due diligence. It helps with making sure that you have a partner that understands the legal environment. And all of this is done with the contractual guarantee that we are not training off of your data. And so that helps you, again, live up to both your clients and regulators' expectations of confidentiality. I hope that answers your question, John. If not, I'm happy to speak some more with you offline.
Thank you, Joshua. That pretty well wraps up our questions, and we're definitely at time now. So I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time out of their busy schedules today. Please reach out to any of us at Convergence Networks or Clio if you want to chat further about anything. We're always happy to continue the conversation and provide guidance and help you do some structure and define your intent. So it was a real pleasure to join everyone this afternoon. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.